And now in the closing straight of what's going on in the Asaase Breakfast Show, yes, that business that was raised by the 24th of February celebrations yesterday, or the 24th of February, should I say, commemorations, because there wasn't much of a celebratory note to some of the debate that was going on about the 1966 coup, the 59th anniversary of which we celebrated yesterday. Or we marked yesterday. I must be careful about my choice of words here. So the group of officers that overthrew the government of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah on the 24th of February 1966, including Lieutenant-Colonel Kwasi, or Kushi, maybe, Kotoka, after whom our international airport, previously our only international airport here in Accra, is named Kotoka International Airport, KIA, known universally, a recognizable call signal, as Kujo was saying earlier on, in the international air traffic system. A lot of calls emerging, and indeed a lawsuit being brought by certain members of Democracy Hub, a case at the Supreme Court calling for the renaming of our premier international airport. We now have 3. Why was the airport named after Kotoka? And should indeed the name be dropped, as the Democracy Hub protesters believe? Joining us for that discussion now, we have Professor Kwame Kwasi, Professor of History and the former head of the Department of History at the University of Cape Coast, and Nana Osei Bonsu Safukantanka, whom you may have heard if you were listening into the big bulletin yesterday, who is very steeped in history, notably a centre history, but all matters to do with the history of this dear country that we call Ghana. And we say good morning, first of all, to Professor Kwasi. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for joining us on the
Hello.
Hello. Is that Nana Osei Bonsu also joining us? Hello, is that...
Good morning.
Good morning. So I think we can hear both of you gentlemen. Good morning and welcome to the Asaase Breakfast Show.
Good morning. Welcome, thank you.
So perhaps if I could turn first to Professor Kwasi, Kwame Kwasi, this business of the renaming of Kotoka International Airport, for you, is it a serious and core discussion that has a bearing on our sense of history, and as we understand history as Ghanaians, or is it a red herring?
Oh, thank you very much. I think it's a red herring. You don't have to waste our time on it, for the simple reason that Kotoka is part of Ghana's history. That's National Liberation Movement. The National Liberation Council, the soldiers who took up arms and overthrew for Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's regime, and then subsequently the counter-coup that emerged a year later, led by Yeboah Atta and Osei Poku, which led to the death of Kotoka. And as a result of that, the airport, Accra International Airport, was named after Kotoka. You cannot wish away any part of our history. It is as significant that coup, and then also the naming of the airport after Kotoka is as significant as for Dr. Kwame Nkrumah leading this country to attain independence, and subsequently naming certain monuments after him, like Accra interchange, the interchange at Circle, which is now also called Dubai, or Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. Why is it that we are always against our opponents or against other people? When it is about us, then it is good. When it is about other people, then it is bad. Even though Afrifa and Kotoka staged a coup to overthrow a democratically elected government, I think that if you were to look into or examine critically the circumstances that led to the overthrow of Nkrumah's regime, you will see that at that time they were justified, and today they are still justified. They should leave it to historians and leave it to the posterity to judge. And it is not they who have to determine whether the name Kotoka International Airport should be changed to another name, for the simple reason that Kotoka was a soldier, a military man who, together with a FIFA, plotted the coup and eventually they overthrew Nkrumah. They should look at the issue critically, dispassionately. It is part of our history, and therefore we cannot wash it away.
Nana Osei-Bonsu, you've heard there the very firm-voiced suggestion made by Professor Kwarteng. Playing devil's advocate here, some people might say there are other countries that have problematic parts of their history. You wouldn't expect Liberia perhaps to be naming its airport after Master Sergeant Samuel Doe. You wouldn't expect anybody in Germany to be naming any national institution after Adolf Hitler. Not putting Lieutenant Colonel Kotoka on the same basis. Lieutenant-General, I believe, he actually died as at the time of his assassination in 1967. But why should we glorify him by naming our premier international airport after him? Nana?
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know the question was for me.
Yes, sorry, I did preface it with your name. But your response to the idea that we're glorifying somebody that perhaps we shouldn't.
Yes. Well, Professor Kwarteng has spoken, and it is full of wisdom. And actually, there wouldn't have been any need by adding anything to it. But since it is a discussion, it is still important that I chip in something. What is important is that let's first and foremost ask about who are asking for the change and why. Did they have any special academic or very serious reasons why they want to change? And is it based on emotions? And emotions leading to people getting angry. We have seen in this country that sometimes when something is about a people, other groups of people also get angry. Now, this is history. And history is not about emotions. History is about facts and figures. And just like anybody will do mathematics. The proof is that the proof of the whole thing is that Prof told us that it is telling us about our history. So the information, the most important thing is that the name Kotoka is in our history and cannot be taken out of our history. And it is in our history, not just pushed there. It is of a very significant matter, very, very significant history in our everyday life. Nobody can talk about Kwame Nkrumah without mentioning the other side of him. That is to say, the dictatorial side of him and the bad side of him. And it got to a point when it was so bad that we needed liberation. And then people came in, instead of bloodshed, there was a small bloodshed, and it was overthrown. And people who led it should not be forgotten. Anytime you remove the name Kotoka from the airport, you are telling us that you are cutting away a portion of our history and burying it for good. That if there is nothing to remember Kotoka, then there's nothing to remember the bad side of Nkrumah. We have to maintain our history. This is a country where people get up and start to pull down buildings because they are either old or named after people they don't like. Pull down statues and all that. No, let it remain so that our history could be woven around it. So if in Liberia they had it Sergeant Doe removed, well, that is Liberia. Now, if they have Hitler, so people will not forget Hitler for the part he played for the Germans. If we were to go back to history in no matter what, even from ancient Egypt, you will know that some of the leaders were very rude and crude in trying to correct issues. We know of Mao Zedong, who in China today would say that Mao Zedong is a very bad man. He came to remove some people, and not just ordinary remover. There was a long time elimination of enemies who did not want the proper things to go on. But because in history and government, what is best administered is best. So this is Kotoka and Frifa and others coming in to save a situation that was getting worse.
You mentioned this, and some people would argue, Nana Osei-Bonsu, that this and Professor Kwarteng equally, that this reflects your particular view of history. The Democracy Hub protesters' complaint and why they have brought this petition at the Supreme Court is that what the values that Kotoka stood for and that he lived and in effect died for are militarist values that have no place under our Fourth Republican dispensation, and the kinds of democratic values that we would like to espouse and that we would like to promote. So they're not arguing that we forget history, but they're arguing that we don't do anything to seem to put it on a pedestal. Surely that's an argument with which you can agree, Nana?
Well, as you know, you can't talk about politics or governance without talking about history. They are interwoven. And so trying to maybe sideline history in dealing with politics and governance, it will be incomplete. So it is not just democracy. What people call democracy, it's not a one-way affair. Democracy is depends on the way governance is going and how the people embrace the governance, and that makes it democracy. What is democracy about what Nkrumah was doing? Was it democratic? It was not. If it was not democracy, one-party state, and if we all agree that one-party state is undemocratic, and somebody removes the undemocratic and brings in something that is democratic, then of course we are still talking about democracy.
And this really raises the question, Professor Kwarteng, of the problem particularly around the way Ghana relates to Kotoka and the Kotoka story. And what I meant by personal opinion and its bearing on how people think about Kotoka. The argument there you heard by Nana Osei-Bonsu very feelingly expressed about how the action taken by Kotoka, Harley, Deku, Ankara, Ifrifa, and their compatriots to unseat the government of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, although it was extra-constitutional, because it was seen as freeing, or it is seen as having freed Ghana from somebody who had slightly lost his bearings democratically and had established a one-party state. Therefore, that was justifiable. It's the argument made also by Professor Aaron Michael Quay, and he relates it to our culture in Ghana of destooling chiefs. Do you believe that there is any basis for thinking that the actions of the 24th of February 1966 actually have some bearing or some relationship to Ghanaian culture, Professor Kwarteng?
Well, yeah,
Yes,
I think to a very large extent, it has some relationship with our culture. You know, when Nkrumah became the prime minister and subsequently the president of the republic, those chiefs who were against him, he did everything to remove them from power. And instead, in their stead, he installed people who were even not royals. Most of the chieftaincy problems we have in our country today, from Boko to Accra to Winneba to Ahafo to Ashanti to Achim and all that, most of them had their origin from Nkrumah's time and Nkrumah's action. Don't forget, Nkrumah said that the chiefs who ran away and leave their sandals behind. And indeed, he ensured that that was implemented to the hilt. And all chiefs who did not support CPP, particularly those who belong to the opposition, National Liberation Movement and others, he ensured that they were all removed by CPP chairpersons in the towns and villages and in the paramounts that these people were. And so if you ask me the correlation between culture and Nkrumah's actions, I would say yes, because it affected our chieftaincy institution, which is also part of our culture, because chieftaincy showcases an aspect of the political aspect of our culture, and he interfered with it and diluted it, distorted it. Why should a non-royal be installed as a chief, and why should a legitimate chief who is a royal be removed simply because he did not support the CPP or he did not support Kwame Nkrumah? So I think that Professor Kwei is right. If he said that, he is right. And even though I also say that during Nkrumah's time, he also tried to promote our culture positively by introducing or establishing the office of the state linguist or the state linguist. And during state functions, we saw the state linguist pouring libation before the Muslim prayer and the Christian prayer. So he showcased our culture, he promoted it. But when you are looking at Nkrumah's reign, you have to look at both, as Nana Osebo said, both the positive and and then you draw your conclusion. He was a fantastic man when it came to Pan-Africanism, when it came to liberation of Africa. The entire Africa was virtually, apart from Liberia and Ethiopia, virtually the rest of Africa. Colonial rule. But Nkrumah's famous speech, the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of Africa, inspired the rest of the nationalist fighters in South Africa, in Eastern Africa, in West Africa, in Central Africa, and elsewhere to fight for their independence. He supported them. He did well. When it comes to infrastructure development, he did very, very well. But at the same time, there were certain things he did which bordered on the fundamental human rights of Ghanaians. People were arrested and incarcerated. People got rotting in prison. We talk about J.B. Dankwa, he died in prison. He's not my relative. I'm a scholar. I am an academic. You talk about Obeto Bilamte, he also died in prison. Pastor Kutu, he was fortunate he was released. But it wasn't easy for so many people. When I was growing up, there was a man in my hometown who was detained in prison without trial. They used the PD, the Prevention Detention Act, to imprison the man. Even though he was freed after the coup d'etat of 1966, 24 February 1966, the man was never of himself throughout the rest of his life because of the way and manner he was treated. And you can count of many people who suffered the same fate. So if we are looking at the issue, we should look at it dispassionately. We shouldn't talk today that democracy have or whatever they are called. They should not say that today we are enjoying democracy, and so the principles of democracy and what Kotoka and others did have no correlation, and therefore you should expunge Kotoka's name from Kotoka International Airport. I will not agree with that. For the simple reason, as I intimated earlier, that we have our history, we have our economic history, our political history, we have our socio-cultural history, and Kotoka and others are part of our socio-economic history. Some of these people, don't they take inspiration from J.J. Rawlings, who equally overthrew a legitimate government, that of Dr. Hillary Liman during the Third Republic? So do you say that because J.J. Rawlings overthrew a legitimate regime, a democratically elected regime, we should plot J.J. Rawlings' name from Ghanaian history or from the history of Africa? No, that would be a big mistake that will ever be committed by Ghanaians. If you come to my Department of History and Diplomacy in the University of Cape Coast, we have a postgraduate course called Military Regimes in Africa. Why will an academic institution study military regimes and coup d'etats in Ghana, in Africa? Because of their significance, because they are relevant to the history, the political history, and then the socio-political development of all the countries in which those coups and the revolutions occurred. And in Ghana, ours was led by Kotoka and FIFA and others. And so, whether we like it or not, for better or for worse, so their names must be kept there for people to study them and then make their own conclusions. But it should not be the democracy hub that should tell the rest of Ghana that we should remove Kotoka's name and put what name there. I'm putting the question. We should remove Kotoka's name and put what name there.
I think they were specifically asking for Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's...
Kwame Nkrumah was a dictator, because Kwame Nkrumah created some problems in the area of chieftaincy by removing
yes, you made the point. You made the point, Professor Kwasi. You made the point, Professor Kwarting, and thank you very much for raising it. I would say that from the point of view of some people, though, it's a very fine line between acknowledging the facts of history and our past as a nation, as a people, and glorifying some of the less salubrious aspects of the past. But as you say, it's a very nuanced picture on all fronts, and I think the argument you're making is that one has to accept the whole and learn to see it, the whole of our past history, with more depth. I'm very glad, though, Professor Kwarting, that you raised the question of Pan-Africanism and Kwame Nkrumah's perception in the eyes of other people in Africa. Nana Sebunsu Safukantanka, I wondered if I could turn to you and ask you about this. The naming of Kotoka International Airport specifically after Emmanuel Kwasi Kotoka is relevant in the sense that it's actually the spot where he fell. In 1967, he was stabbed and shot and fell on that spot. There was a statue to mark him on the spot, since removed because of works at KIA. But to Pan-Africanists, the ideals for which Kwame Nkrumah stood and the vision that he set out for the whole of sub-Saharan Africa is of so much weight that anyone or anything that seemed to have stood against him in the past is not something that should be, or somebody who should be celebrated or commemorated in any way. Does the Pan-Africanist dimension of this discussion have some bearing on the way we should portray Kotoka from your point of view, Nana Sebunsu?
Yes, you agree with me that nobody is trying to put Kotoka above Nkrumah. Nobody is trying to do that. And I don't think somebody will do that. We give Nkrumah his due when necessary, and somebody else's due when necessary. And this is what the lovers of Nkrumah should understand, that you cannot be Nkrumah, everything Nkrumah. And even if everything is about Nkrumah, the aspects of that everything about him that are bad must be studied, must be looked at so that it will not be repeated. Some of us were grown-ups, at least in middle school, in those days, in Nkrumah's days, we were in the middle school, what you would call senior secondary school. Middle school was even higher than senior secondary school in terms of age and the content. Mm-hmm. But in which case, I saw it myself. So the kind of fear and tyranny that we lived in those moments, anybody that came in to liberate us would, of course, be a hero. And that is why Kotoka is a hero. Those who know, who saw what happened in those days, and those who have read and have analyzed it would also agree with me that it was not something we could glorify. And so that section of liberation is where Kotoka becomes very important. It is not just because he was fighting and he died at the airport. That is why he's been named after the airport. It was part of the struggle, and to liberate Ghanaians or his people from the tyranny that was going on. So as soon as you mention Kotoka, it is about freedom. Nkrumah might have, you can talk about Nkrumah, economic freedom, external or foreign affairs issues and all that, which he did very, very well. And we are talking about an area affecting people. If you put up all industries, everywhere we turn around to see industries, left, right, center, and the people are in grief, I think the kind of industries or whatever you said you have put up would be meaningless. Mm. So the people not matter before all the other things that we're talking about. Mm. And the people were the very people you were sacrificing for material gains. Mm. And it doesn't work anywhere in the world that way, that people should be sacrificed for material gains. Mm. And so those who are not seeing the danger that that section of Nkrumah's rule portrayed must go back to their notes. Mm. I think Kotoka deserves to be honored.
Mm. Now, viewers of our Facebook stream will be able to see pictures, will have been able to see pictures for a while now of the funeral in April 1967 of Lieutenant-General, as he died, Emmanuel Kwasi Kotoka, in April 1967. And yes, a very solemn moment it was in our nation's history. A quick one in conclusion to both of you. First of you, Nana Osei-Bonsu, given what you said about accepting Ghana's history in its full glory, the warped bits, the shiny bits, the gold-coloured bits, and the bits that are a little bit mildewed or bedecked with mould, would you expect us also to be glorifying the memory of such figures from our past as Dodoya Kaibi, the famed wicked Ga matriarch, who was eventually put in a pit by her own people and killed? She was buried alive after being stoned because she was so wicked to her own people. Is that part of our acceptance of our own history, briefly?
Yes, throughout history, where wicked people or wicked rulers have not been glorified or have not died honestly, I think people enjoy, people jubilate over their death, whether the death was cruel or was peaceful. We all saw Abacha and the way he died. Everything was covered. The whole world jubilated. Why? Even those who were not from that country jubilated. And those who lived in 1966 saw the kind of jubilation. It was far ahead of what the jubilation that we saw in the case of Abacha. Why? Because people felt liberated. So this is, if somebody is terrorizing his people, whether he was buried in a pit alive or whether he was hacked to death or whatever way the people got rid of him, does not matter. Though it might be painful, but it doesn't matter. It comes to solve a problem.
Professor Kwarteng, very briefly, the same question to you. Does this give you room, perhaps, to justify celebrating the memory of a figure like Dode Akaibi, also from Ghana's past?
I will repeat what I said earlier. The history, whatever has happened in the past, that has relevance to society or affected society, either positive or negative, was history. And a lesson must be learned out of it. So we learn history so that we don't repeat the past mistakes. If the crime mother you mentioned, the Akadi or whatever her name is, was a wicked leader, so we still have to study her. We don't have to forget about her. We don't have to discard her memory or anything that he did. That is what will make the history full. And it will enable us to know that there are some people who are wicked and some rulers who are good. And people will not associate with bad rulers. And then also will not repeat the mistake of those bad rulers, but will only follow or emulate what the good things that rulers made, so that we don't repeat our mistakes. If you look at the Bible, you look at the book of the first and second book of Kings, you see all the kings, all the monarchs who ruled in Israel, and you see some of them good. Manasseh was a wicked king. Manasseh, he ruled for so many years. He was a wicked king, but his memory had not been eradicated. So a lot is written about Manasseh, but when the scripture narrates the accounts of Manasseh, he talks about, it concludes by saying that he was a wicked king and that he died and he was buried with his fathers or forefathers. So in the same way, whether any ruler, present or past, did good or did bad, we cannot forget about them. And we will not expand their names from our history. It's still relevant as whether he's bad or good. His memory in the history books is as relevant as any other thing that we hold dear to. So I would say that
Professor Kwarteng, I'm afraid
nobody should touch our history. Nobody should touch our history. It should remain as it is.
So thank you very much, Professor Kwarteng. So history in its full aspects is what I believe both our contributors to that discussion have to recommend to all of us in Ghana. Professor Kwame Kwarteng is Professor of History and the former head of the Department of History